Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Traversing the Stars podcast. Today's special guest is Jeremy Lambert. You know him as the writer of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from Boom. Now, come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Lambert. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Hello, hello. Thanks so much for having me. I
It's,
appreciate it.
it's definitely my pleasure. I'm a big fan of yours, especially with what you did with Buffy the Vampire Slayer or are doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, a question I always like to ask is what inspired you to become a writer and who were your earliest influences?
Oh, good one. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just the love of story across all mediums kind of just, was what, propelled me into it. I was so completely obsessed with Lord of the Rings that I remember, and as you can probably see, or at least the people watching can see behind me with the replica weapons everywhere. But it was the first moment after Fellowship of the Ring had ended when something clicked for me in that people actually made this, and that's an actual thing that you can do, or at least aspire to. Um, and that sort of led into a bunch of different things, obviously with comic books as well, where it's just like I'm staring at the credits in a new way and figuring out that I can follow individuals and creators and people that are actually creating these things, and it definitely didn't um, become real for me until a few years after that, I would say. But even even earlier than that moment, there was just an obsession with stories of every kind, right? The movies that you can get on TV, but also a lot of the comics that I was getting were ones that I was able to you know get from Free Comic Book Day or from maybe a collected edition at a library. I grew up in Bowie, Maryland, and there was the PG County Library there, and I would just go and basically just get whatever I could and get my hands on anything. And that was my main experience with comics at an early age. And so a lot of it, I remember there was a Marvel Adventures line for younger readers, and that was
Mm.
one of my gateways into it, and getting particularly the Hulk and Thor and Spidey and a lot of that. And um, yeah, I mean, I think that the my biggest influences um, definitely hit me at different times, and I'd say probably the first, like I said, I think in of stories in different mediums and different formats,
Mm.
and the strengths of each medium and format, and kind of learn that through my influences. And I would say probably that for me, when it comes to really comics and movies and everything like that, it encapsulated a lot for me in my teen years with Neil Gaiman,
Mm.
in particular. But because that kind of led to so many different other things. You discover so many artists through a writer like that, and so you start and find out Colin Doran, and a lot of different, and you just kind of trace everything, and you start, it's like a tree, you're just branching off into 1,000 different things. But it's those gateway things that everyone finds at any point in their life, where you just start going down those different paths. And I think he was probably one of the people that opened me up to the world of comics and
Mm.
and artists, um, and yeah, and then there's so many that come to mind right now, but I would go on for another 30 minutes, on that front. But now it's just it's still happening on a almost a daily basis at this point. It's just like I'm going through Emily Carroll's work, or in whatever medium, like Kelly Link, or so many people who I just immediately get into their work, and then all of a sudden I discover 20 new favorite people who I have to follow. It's a wonderful thing.
I was gonna say for those who might just be listening to us, that is a nice background you've got there. Are
Oh,
those in that glass case? Is that Lord of the
yeah.
Rings of?
We Yeah, we got
Peter?
a lot of we have a lot of Warhammer miniatures here.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah, quite a few. And Lord of the Rings actually is funny was sort of my gateway into fantasy miniatures because that was another point for me where I when I discovered that there was a miniatures game of Fellowship of the Ring and this Mines of Moria set that Games Workshop put out, and immediately just delved deep into a world of plastic and pewter figurines that you put together and paint, and so that's another obsession. But definitely another huge influence
It-
is that Warhammer world.
it is funny. Just some movies you hear over and over again as being influential, and Lord of the Rings, Fellowship
Mm.
of the Ring was a big one for me as well. There's a scene in Fellowship of the Rings where Gandalf is in Gondor and he's looking at through all the old
Yeah.
pages and pages, of old text, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the, as dumb as it sounds, it was one of the big reasons why I started reading classic literature. I was
Oh, it's
like,
amazing.
right, I was looking at that, I was like, holy, just the idea that the old paper and the history and and all that
Yeah.
information. I was like, I want to do that. So I just had this vision like going to these old books. I used to collect old books after that. Going to
Oh,
these old
cool.
bookstores and being like, imagine myself as Gandalf going through these old all these papers, going papyrus and all that. I'm being like, there's
Yeah.
information here, important information. I will learn it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's amazing. I love that because it's discovery, right? Like it's just, and it's funny. I love that question that you had because it happens so like at every age it happens constantly. I think if you're
Mm,
always going to be curious, especially people who are so interested in creating things, or at least interested in the process of creating things, or whatever it is, or just art and story in general, which I would say is hopefully everyone,
mm.
um, but in some fashion. But yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic because so many people take so many different things away from that. Like the fact that you just went on, completely down this classic literature, element, especially with history of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and a lot of that, is fantastic. That's so cool. Um, so, what do you have any? Do you have any favorite classics that come to mind that were a direct result of that?
Oh, there's so many. Like I said, I'm now an actually English teacher in high school.
Amazing!
I
See,
actually
look at
teach.
this. Oh,
I actually teach classic literature all the time, and some of my favorite works came from that. The Divine Comedy with Dante. That was one of the early ones
oh,
I
this
picked
is
up. I
so
was like,
cool.
this is
Yeah,
amazing. Obviously, I had read Lord of the Rings prior to the movie, but I had
yeah, yeah.
that's classic. There's a lot I just kept
I
reading,
love
and then
this.
eventually, I started reading, getting deeper, with, the Shakespeare and
Yeah, yeah,
Marlowe and blah blah blah. And my father was like, um, what are you gonna do? You're going back to school. You're gonna do something because I had changed
yeah.
my goals in life. I was a primatologist before, and I decided to stop doing that and move into something else. I went into teaching. I was like, am I gonna do history? Or am I gonna do English? And I had started collecting, these classic literature texts, and I was
Yeah.
like, it's English.
That's awesome. Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
congratulations. That's huge.
it's amazing what fiction does to you. Like great
Yeah,
fiction just changes. It can change you completely.
totally. I mean, it just changes, it acts as I think a lot of great fiction does this. Whether it's not necessarily an emulation of character as the literal reading of it, but I think it also just acts as a great influence, as a good influence
Mm.
to in so many areas of your life. Like not saying like I'm gonna be like this person or whatever it is, but it's just like there's a lot of emotional understanding and maturity that comes through it, and again at any age, like not just when you're growing up. But it really has had such a profound impact on my life and on the lives of most everyone I know. And that's just one of the magics of it. Yeah.
So since you were inspired, through Lord of the Rings and
Mm.
Gaiman and stuff like that, when you're writing, somewhere in the back of your head, are you thinking to yourself what you're writing could be what's going to be inspiring that the next generation to want to do something in the realm
Mm.
of fiction?
Uh, no, and probably because I am just anxious mess and very self-critical. Um, And I have the imposter syndrome is out of this world. Just because, it's just like I'm gonna be grateful if, five people pick this up or something like that. Everybody, and so it's on one hand, it's extremely nerve wracking, and on the other hand, it's extremely reassuring in that you end up circling around, just circling back around to, well, I just need to tell the stories that I'm most passionate
Mm,
about. I need to tell the stories in the way that I want to tell them, within reason. Like, don't,
yeah.
be such a you know, I'm not going to delve too far into that, but basically, don't be. Can I curse? Okay, just don't be such an asshole to anyone that you're working with, or being asked to work with, or anything like that, because um, it just gets we're only here for a limited amount of time, and you know. eh, I think that's a huge part of working in any field, but especially in the industries that we're talking about, is just that these are high pressure, high stress, a lot of
Mm.
times environments, and everyone's trying to do their best, and there's going to be disagreements, and you're going to work things out, but I think it's a big part of it as well. So really, all to say that in summation is just that I think I spend far too much time worrying about if I'm actually good enough to do something, and just worrying about making sure that everyone's taken care of. That I haven't really thought of it, to be perfectly honest, because yeah, it's kind of scary.
Well, I mean, when you're writing a title like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you
Mhm.
know it's a built-in audience. You know you have readers. I mean, isn't like I write some indie books on the side, and when I release something, there's always a question of, is anyone going to pick it up and we're going to read it?
Yeah.
When you're writing
Yeah.
Buffy, there's an audience. You're guaranteed readers, right? Because
Hmm.
they're going to want it because they know the character, and the character
Yeah.
has been in the cultural consciousness for a while now.
Mhm.
Does that relax you knowing that the book is going to be out there and it will have readership, or does that add further anxiety knowing that these people have expectations already on you before you have even written the first book, that
Yeah.
they already know, like, I know what Buffy's
Yeah.
supposed to be. I've been,
Oh yeah.
watching the show for 20 something years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's basically again both, because it's you get that element of anxiety, and that element of reassurance, but I think a lot of it is in order to take on a job like that, I think there doesn't need to be there doesn't need to be a specific hill that you're willing to die on immediately, I guess, from that point of view, when it comes to characters or anything like that, or screw everyone else, I'm doing this thing. But um, there is a reverence to, and a love for the what's come before,
Mm.
and the characters especially. It's just like really deeply, on an emotional level, connected with me, and yeah, in a very deep way, in a profound way, and changed my life. It was one of the things, the stories that changed my life. It's up there in my holy trinity. But I think that you know you can let that fear derail you a bit. And so you just have to make sure that, at least for me, it's very important to try and within the bounds of what's allowed, and what the story arcs are, and if the publisher has a very specific place they need to get to, and you need to get them there, you have a sandbox to play in, for sure. Some jobs are a bit more open, and some are a bit more driven, and clear in where they're going. And so you just have to, if you're accepting that job, play within the bounds of that, and but still tell the story that you are on an emotional level most connected with, and want to do,
Mm.
desperately want to do for these characters, because a lot of that question of are people are going to be picking this up. They have very specific ideas of how Willow talks, for example, or how this relationship is supposed to go, or there's a lot of specificity there, and again, you just kind of have to sort of reassure yourself that so long as me, a person who has a deep and abiding love for these characters and the new way that we're telling the story, that's going to resonate with other people because it'll be a pretty universal, um, and shared thing.
Now, with once again with Buffy, once again, everyone knows Buffy was created by Josh Whedon, who is well known for the dialogue. You know, the kind of like that
Mm.
quippy kind of very fluid dialogue.
Hmm.
You have also, because it's a TV show, you also have the cadence of the how the actors speak and how they deliver lines. When you're trying to write it, are those things that you have to keep in mind, the rhythms that we didn't use, or the actors, or because it is something kind of separate, are you kind of trying to push that out of your mind and go, I will kind of focus on what I think they kind of more should, they should feel like this, or this what serves the story best at this moment.
Yeah, yeah. I think the first thing, and it's an interesting, situation to come into because I started on Buffy with the Hellmouth event crossover, and one of my best friends, Jordy Belair, started the new sort of Boomverse, the Buffyverse that Boom's doing. Back in I think it was 2018 at this point. I'm trying to remember years, but but yeah. And so when I came on board, I believe it was about issue 8 where Buffy had gotten up to, and at that point, Geordie had done a lot of that work in terms of establishing a new status quo in 2019 for Buffy. And so, you know, basically, it just a lot of my work came in on the coattails of Geordie and the way that those characters were built up. But I think it is very important again to have that love for and that care
Mm.
and sort of compassion for the story because that sort of drives everything else. Like there's definitely times where I've rewatched episodes to try and get a cadence right or to try and get something right, because it works in our world as well. It
Mm.
works, the way like specifically, I'm thinking of the characters of Anya and Wesley in our comics because they are certainly different in terms of their lives and where they are and what they do and how they're brought in and introduced and that sort of thing in our world versus the show. But I think that it still plays into an element of who they are and how their characters sound and that sort of thing. So you want to get the cadence right. Like a character like Giles just lives in my head, 24/7. I will I obsess with Giles and love Giles, but and obviously and Buffy and Willow and Xander are always just ever present,
Mm.
so that kind of comes a bit, I guess second nature because of having watched the show so many times, and a love for certain characters and everything like that. But yeah, it's a bit of balance because you kind of have to do that thing of the balancing act of making sure that you're staying true. The first most important thing is making sure that you're staying true to this version of the characters and their emotional arcs and making sure that you're addressing that responsibly, but at the same time there's a lot of fun in making sure that you get the cadence right, or you make sure that you get a certain word here or two there, right, and just getting the energy of somebody down and how you can bring that into the comic world versus the show, or
Mm.
even adapting again from a lot of the Buffy comics that have come before, just how you can play around with that in the comics medium, and give something for Xander dialogue a bit more of a frenetic pace to it, or just however that breaks down. You're always trying fun experiments.
So you were a Buffy fan prior to getting the gig. You've been a fan.
Yeah,
You real
very much so. Yeah, well, it's funny because I discovered Buffy late. When I was younger, I think maybe when I was in high school, my friend's sister would be watching Buffy, and I'd catch an episode here and there, and was blown away. But it was a bit more difficult to get your hands on the show and watch things in order, and I was very much a stickler for that, and so it didn't happen until later. And again, Jordy, well before either of us were working on Buffy in any capacity, was the person who really got me into Buffy. And I was over at her place, like watching. We were watching a ton of episodes, and luckily I was there for some really big ones. I'll say no more about the episode itself, but when I saw the body, I was at Jordy's house, and it's a good thing that I was, because I was an emotional wreck. Um, and but I got to experience. It's really cool that we were both able to co-write and work together on the series, because I definitely credit Jordy with getting me into Buffy, and it just became such a profound experience for me, because I basically binged the whole show very quickly, and it means so much to me, and those characters, and just sharing that with dear friends really really means a lot to me, and so it's been a part of me ever since. And getting to work on Buffy, in any capacity, but especially being able to co-write and write, some Buffy books has meant the world, and is yeah, just something I really cherish.
So as you said, so you took over from Jordy Belair, who with issue 23.
It was
And
well, yes, okay, so yeah, I think it was issue 23. I started on Hellmouth, and then I came in and started co-writing with her on the main series with issue 17, and then yeah, took over. I think it was like 23. Yeah.
um, is it difficult to kind of take the baton from another writer? Is that a challenge?
Yes.
That's a challenge, because once again, there's a little writer who has established a voice on the show. I
Hmm.
mean, in the comic book, you have,
Hmm.
which is based on another very well-known writer. I said Whedon had his
Yeah, yeah.
voice. Jordy put on her voice, and then you have you got to add your own. So,
Hmm.
are you trying to mimic Jordy? I mean, you have to kind of feel like you need to mimic Jordy's voice, or it was important to establish your own?
It's a great question. I the quick answer is that um, it's another balancing act. The main thing that I had to do, though, was bring what I could to the arcs that were in my charge, and so there's a reality to that with you know basically, yeah, picking up the baton from another writer, sort of mid arc, and also dealing with what's happening in the public with the publisher at large, and with plans and things like that. So there's, and it's a burgeoning, it's a still in the process of being built, but it's not a secret really anymore that there's a Buffy verse, and there's a boom verse really to this, to the Buffy comics. And obviously you have the Angel line and Willow, which happen sort of in our world. But one of the big issues that we did, and sorry if anybody's, I'll put a spoiler warning up here for anyone that hasn't finished it or is just about to get started or anything like that. But with issue 25, it kind of broke everything open in terms of a multiverse existing, and there's I'll leave the little Easter egg in at the end there, so I'll keep that for people to discover. But and so now we're getting books like Buffy the Last Vampire Slayer, which is a wonderful book, and it's sort of old man Logan Buffy, right? And so you're getting this Buffy in her 50s and just kicking ass, and it's such a fun take on the character, and something that I think is really cool to see. But there's there's a lot of potential for what's next. But getting back to the original question, is that it definitely is this task really of circling back around as much as you possibly can. Your North Star is the fact that you're writing this, and you're writing this solely right now. So you have to do right by that and your plans as much as possible, because like some of that's not possible, but you really have to just sort of stay true to that North Star and do your very best. But I have such a reverence again for what Jordy has done, and our story now is a continuation of all the foundation and groundwork that Jordy's built. So that exists in our book. I carry that with me, along with any of the plans that are coming from the publisher. So it's just making sure that you tick those boxes and then carry it as best as you can forward with as much I guess bravery as you possibly can, right? Because you need to suggest new things, you need to plan new things, you need to build new things
Mm.
on top of what's already there. And sometimes those are a hard left turn. And so, I'll email the editor on the series, whatever it is, and we'll figure it out. And sometimes it's a bit more of a surprise than others, right? But it's necessary, right? It's the crucial part of doing something that, I mean, it's the crucial part of you being on the book. Like if you're taking over, you're doing something else. Like yes, you obviously have to, for clarity's sake, bridge any gaps and things like
Mm.
that. But you really have to trust your gut and run as far as you can with it.
So when you're writing Buffy, right? Because once again, you you my understanding is that having read the first issue is that
Mm-hmm.
it's Buffy, but it's a slightly different Buffyverse than the TV show. They're on slightly different tracks of existence.
Yes, very
Um,
much so. And it's basically Buffy in 2019. We got cell phones.
and,
Yeah.
and one aspect, obviously, of Buffy, because her introduction as becoming a Slayer is during her
Mm-hmm.
formidable years. I mean, she's a teenager when she
Mm-hmm.
becomes a Slayer. So obviously, she's growing as the stories progress, right? So
Yeah.
when you're thinking about her as a character, as you're writing these issues now, now up to issue 33, about to be 34,
Mm-hmm.
how are you thinking about her growing as not only an individual but also as a leader during the run that you're
Yeah.
writing?
Yeah. That's a really interesting one because of, again, the introduction of, let's say, this multiverse. There is a massive question with Buffy, and that's just a bit of a crisis of confidence and in who she is, and I'm tying that a lot to my own high school experiences and my friends, where it's just like just there's a, at least at this particular point in time with Buffy, there's a deep unease with who she can become and who she is and what freedom there is in that, and a lot of that exists in the show as well. But we're introducing, we have Kendra and Faith and a lot of different characters that are performing the job of the Slayer, let's say. And so there's just so much as a leader, right? Buffy is trying to grapple with this and trying to lead the charge. And I'll leave you to read the books to figure out how all of that goes on. But there is a huge um, just emotional crisis that I think that comes with that, because it's just like, well, this person's better than me at this, or that but also like they should be doing this, and I'm scared about what's going to come up with X, Y, and Z with these characters
Mm.
in my relationships and life, just life in general. Um, and it can be small moments and it can be big moments, but it's very difficult, I think, at any point in your life when you're faced with a big bad, whether characterize someone or something as that big bad, and then it's just you know exponentially modified when you start bringing in, um, you know, just checking in with the fact that this is a human, this is a young human and a growing human,
Mm.
and is going through so many of the doubts and fears that we all have. And I think not to give too much away, but with the multiverse as well, if you when you discover, that there is another you, um, your world changes, and but also I think the fun part there and the very Buffy part there is that you know uh, you change. I mean, you're basically the fear of other selves and the fact that you're just worried about the fact that there's other people out there and there's other yous out there, and it's questioning everything about yourself, and it's just like, well, what if they're better me's and that sort of thing. um, it just asks a lot of questions. I'm trying to dance around it a bit to not give too much away, but it really does address on an emotional level, you know the self doubt and the crises that come with that, in a very funny way. And those are going to be represented by characters, by big bads, by monsters, and by vampires, and that's a lot of the fun of Buffy's, right? You can encapsulate a lot of those fears
Yeah.
in characters and antagonists, right? And bringing those into play and into the story where you know um, Buffy's very literally grappling with her own worst fears, and um, those very emotional fears, and those very fears of the future. When you're a young person that's told that they're solely responsible and now sharing a responsibility to keep the world turning.
I mean, I think it's really cool. It sounds a lot like you're using the multiverse Buffys
Mm.
to better define the Buffyverse Buffy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like you're
absolutely.
by comparison, contrasting who they are. Is that how you're also differentiating across from the different Buffys as well? How are they going to within relation to? I don't know if you call her the Prime Buffy now. I mean, I don't know how you want to phrase it, but the Prime
Yeah.
Buffy.
Yeah, Brian Buffy works, man. That's funny. Yeah, it's basically, and you can use however many devices to do this, but it is sort of this, like, mirrored element. You have a lot of characters, and in comics, right, there's essentially 22 pages per issue, and sometimes you get a bit more to work with here and there, but you don't have the time, especially with how vast the cast grew for the comic book. um, you don't have the time to cover everything and every one necessarily that you want to, or certain things are going to fit and certain things aren't. But again, you're just coming back to that North Star of Buffy, or Prime Buffy, Buffy Prime. And so it's that's the heartbeat of the book. And there's still going to be a lot of focus on characters like Kendra and characters like Faith, and Willow. But I think that you do have to keep circling back around and use a lot of the characters who are introduced, especially when you're dealing with timelines and multiverses and things like that. Like, you introduce a lot of funky mirrors, right? You're in a wacky house of mirrors, and the characters obviously have depth and their own journeys to go through, but they also, with their introduction, introduce another element, for Buffy, and to further that story and that sort of emotional journey.
Because the cast is so large,
Mm-hmm.
is it hard not to lose characters within the story where you realize they're you haven't met them in a while, or they're kind of like they're like falling off the cliff a little bit because you don't
Right.
have time to really get into them or focus on them. You're kind of stuck on maybe one or two characters that maybe are now taking up the oxygen more than they should.
Yeah, I mean, you'll always find that, and the hope, right, is that that's in the first or second draft of the script, where you catch all those things. But I do think that you do find, that certain things need to take center stage more than others, and that tends to be, again, for me, those heartbeats, right, of of a story, which are really just sort of very emotional scenes, and angsty scenes, or or just any scene that I think a lot of people would sort of look quizzically at, and it's not some big action set piece or anything like that, where you build, or at least for me, building the stories around those moments is key, and sometimes I'll realize it's the wrong moment to focus on in that issue, or it doesn't give, it's not strong enough for whatever reason, and the context of the overall story, so you go in and change those things. But yeah, I mean, with a cast this big, you have a task of giving everybody their due, but while maintaining that first goal of making sure that Buffy's story is well told, um, and is being explored in the right way.
Mm. And the big villain right now for the current storyline is Silas, who
Yeah, Silas.
is like a massive apocalyptic level threat. I mean, he's not only a threat to Buffy's world, Prime Buffy's world, but
Yeah.
every multiverse apparently as well.
Mm-hmm.
Running a character like that is that level. Is there a scope problem where he's so
Mm-hmm.
large that it's hard to grasp him as or concern of grasp how a reader can grasp onto him as a character, and how do
Yeah.
you confront that?
Yeah, I mean, it's big, right? It's huge. If you're having literally multiverse level threat, you have to find ways to make that a personal level.
Mm.
And what I wanted to do with Silas, there was basically some discussion before I was, before I came on the series, about a threat that is multiversal, right? Like almost just a Colossus level threat. Um, and it's or a colossal level threat, and it's basically just like, um, my instinct in trying to figure out what that could be is, someone, a cosmic level figure, um, who did one of the things that I fear the most, and is in a way sort of eating worlds, right? Which is, memory, and taking memory from people, and taking so much of their humanity away with the simple act of memory eating, and sort of wiping them of friendships, and of, love in a lot of ways, and their fondest, people around them, and what they know and love about themselves, and that sort of thing. So that was the biggest sort of design level for me, that connected on a very personal and immediate level with Buffy, where it's just like, if we can focus on her own memories, and focus on the memories of her friends, and the Scoobies and Giles, and that's going to be what kind of connects on a very direct level, on an immediate sort of, a story, level A, of the comic. Then that's what can kind of lead to everything else, and all of the other multiverse threats or universe threats can kind of come after this, to show the scope
Mm.
of what that is. But we sort of experience it through, I would say, Buffy and Faith are the two key people, who were, at least were witnessing go through. There's a lot of twisting and turning with memories, but using, both of their memories as a way to sort of have a through line through this entire arc of the big bad, and to show the threat, level of the big bad. So really, it was just born out of my absolute fear of forgetting, some of the biggest, most important things to me, and
Mm.
most important people to me, and, just memory loss. Really, like, it was a huge through line, and designing that big bad, and a sort of emotional journey for everybody else.
Now, is it true that issue 34 is your final issue on Buffy, and is it the final issue of the series as well, or your run on it?
It is, so yes, it is the final issue of my run on Buffy. So issue 34 is our last dance, so to speak. But there is an anniversary special that I have a nice big story in, like an issue size story. So this is going to be huge. It's going to be really, really fun, and I can't wait to read it for all the other writers and artists that are working on it. But yeah, after that, it's done for me. In terms of what's next, there's a lot of new series that are coming out. A dear friend of mine named Sarah Gailey, they have a series that they're writing for Buffy. I could not be more excited. I've heard a little bit about it. That's all I'll say right now. But like that, and Buffy the Last Vampire Slayer from Casey Gilly, and yeah, I mean, I think that it's just really, really exciting to be seeing at what's next and what's coming up next for everyone. Because when I when I came on, it was kind of just like it was co-writing, and then Jordy had left the book, and so I was there, and I was, to be completely honest, like it was almost like, it's like, is this issue gonna be it, or is this one gonna be it for me? Am I gonna get the call and they're like, get out of here? You never know, and to be totally honest, I figured it might be the case where I'll just get the phone call and be like, all right, see you later. Um, so I'm very lucky to have stuck on for so long, and yeah, just I really can't wait to be able to read what's up next for Buffy. I only know, like I said, what I've mentioned, but I know that there's going to be a lot of good stuff.
So what's next then for you?
I have so I've been sitting on a few announcements that I still can't say. Yeah, I've been really busy with basically an OGN, which will be announced at some point. I'm assuming this year, and I have another potential mini series that I might be able to announce in the next few months as well. So mostly just waiting around to see what I can talk about, that kind of stuff. But I've been writing some new middle grade projects as well, which kind of returns me to my Goosebumps roots, which was the first sort of book that I was able to work on. And I've been working a lot in that realm, and fantasy and horror. So plenty more of that, on the way. And I can't wait to talk about those, but I'm sorry that I can't say anything yet.
So are these creator owned, or are these working for a established franchise or company?
The creator owned.
Creator owned.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Creator owned.
Very cool.
So yeah, so we'll see, when we when we can say anything about it, but I'll let you know as soon as I can.
Please do, and come back on the
Sorry
show
to be coy.
No worries, but come back on the show to talk about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Mr. Lambert, it was a great pleasure talking with you. I really liked what you did with Buffy. I look forward to your final issue of the series, figure out what's going on with Silas and everything.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, for talking with me.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a fantastic night.
All right, you too.